I decided to buy an airplane. My father was a chauffeur at a school for young ladies in Bryn Mawr, Pennsylvania, and I knew some. I worked there too, as somewhat as a helper, and I knew some people there who had maybe a little money, who worked there as maids and cooks, and I borrowed money from them. As a matter of fact, I borrowed $2,000. I'll never forget that. And after I bought the airplane, naturally I couldn't get anyone to teach me how to fly, so I just decided, since I had the airplane, I was going to do something with it. So I started learning myself, which has been done. I'm not the only one person who really taught themselves how to fly, because it can be done if you have access to an airplane. It has happened frequently. And I taxied the plane around on this grass field, and taxied up and down the field and around, and got until I had fair control of the airplane on the ground. And I'd go faster and faster, and eventually one day I thought I had it made, so I just took off. Went around, made a good landing. I really knew how to fly then, and still I couldn't find anyone to go any further with me, giving me maneuvers, what that was required for a transport license, until I found this man by the name of Ernest Buell. He was a German. He operated an airfield up in North Philadelphia. And I approached him and asked him would he give me the instructions so that I could get my transport license, which he agreed to do. And I will never forget that as long as I live.
Mm-hmm.
He instructed me in turns and spins and all the maneuvers required for a transport license. And when I finally got ready for the examination, he took me up to where I was supposed to take the test. And the examiner did not want to give me this examination. He said because he had never given a transport license. No black in the country at that time held a transport license, and he didn't want to give it to me. But this German, who was not prejudiced, talked him into doing it, and he finally decided to give me the examination, which I readily passed. And at the end, I overheard another conversation. The inspector said, German asked him how I made it. I said he did all right. He said, as a matter of fact, he made 100 in the written. He said, I'm not going to give him 100, I'm going to give him 80, but I will give him the license. So I guess when I was the transport license, I got back in must have been 1932.
In addition to his many aviation feats, Chief Anderson was also one of the first two blacks to make a transcontinental flight. In 1929, he, along with Dr. Albert E. Forsyth, took off from an Atlantic City airfield en route across the country.
Dr. Forsyth's idea was to encourage other people to fly, particularly young people. So he decided if we made some trips throughout the country, they'd know about it, and they would become interested, which actually did happen. So we left Atlantic City and flew west to Los Angeles. It was some most interesting thing occurred as we flew across the continent. Because going west, you were running the headwinds all the time. But we made it. We went into Los Angeles successfully, landed there, stayed there a couple days, and then turned around and flew back across the continent again to Atlantic City. And that was the first round trip continental flight made by blacks. And of course, Dr. Forsyth was a very, very ambitious man. He was a very courageous man, had a lot of race pride. And he decided he wanted to make other flights, which we did. We flew to Canada, and eventually we flew to the Bahamas. Matter of fact, we landed the first airplane ever touched ground in Nassau. From Nassau, we went to Cuba, and on down to, Cuba, and then Haiti, and Jamaica, and other islands, Grenada. And then all of these islands where we went, other than Cuba, Cuba did have a lot of airstrips. But none of the other islands had airstrips. So it was very difficult to find places to land where you could land and take off safely. So we landed in Jamaica. At Kingston, we landed in Knutsford Park, which was a polo field. And we just had to find some place to land. We made it all right. Then we got as far down as Port of Spain, Trinidad. We landed there. Matter of fact, an interesting thing, in Grenada, which is next to Trinidad. Grenada, we it's a high mountain right in the center of the island, a small island. The only place we could find the land there was an enclosure of a racetrack, which was on the lee side of this mountain. We got down all right, but when we got ready to take off, we had to take off toward the mountain because the trade winds blow the same direction there all the time. And in taking off, we got altitude, we got off the ground, and approaching close to the mountain, we had to make a 90-degree turn. As we turned, the plane lost altitude. Unfortunately, when it came down, the wheels hit the ground in the enclosure of the racetrack itself. I mean, in the racetrack where the horses ran, and bounced off and didn't hit any fence. We went and flew on that to sea.
Chief Anderson's reputation as a top-ranked flight instructor became widespread and eventually was echoed as far as Tuskegee, Alabama.
The Tuskegee Institute decided they wanted to open up its flight program. They thought about me and Dr. Patterson. I remember I was down at this field, Highland Valley, on Route 1, and I saw a man walking down the road. He was walking, and I recognized him. And I walked out and spoke to him. I said, "Aren't you Dr. Patterson?" He said, "Yes." I said, "Who are you?" He said, "Are you Alfred Anderson?" I wasn't chief then. I said, "Yes." He said, "You and the man I'm looking for." And that was when he engaged me. I asked me, he said, "Will you come to Tuskegee and hit up our flying program?" Which I was very happy to do. And then he told me about this. He told me what to do. He said, "We're going to purchase an airplane from the Waco people." He asked me about this airplane, And I want you to go out there and pick this airplane up, and they'll arrange for you to get acrobatic training in Chicago, and then when you finish that, bring the airplane on to Tuskegee, and we'll start our flight program. But so I left Chicago late in the afternoon. And on the way down, I landed in the pasture to spend the night. And this is interesting. So when I landed there, a young kid, as a matter of fact, he came out to talk to me, and I told him I'd landed there. I was going to spend the night there. I was going to go on my way to Alabama. He said, "Well, why don't you come on in the house here with me?" I said, "No, I'd rather stay out here with my airplane." He said, "Well, if you're going to stay with your airplane, I want to stay here with you." Then his father came out, and he said, "I don't see why you want to stay with your airplane. Why don't you come on inside? And we'll have to give you supper." It was kind of dark then. So when I got in the house, he found out in those days, I was colored. He said, "Oh my God." He said, "I'm not supposed to eat with you." And then I said, "Well, that's up to you." And he said, "Well, come to think of it, that's rather silly. Why don't you come on and sit down here, let's eat." Now, I wish I could remember where that person lived. I just don't remember. I'd just love to see him again. And the next day I went on to Birmingham. When I stopped in Birmingham for fuel, the plane was gassed up. And I heard remarks that those airplanes were hard to come by there because there's a lot of training going on. This airplane going to Tuskegee, that nigger university down there, and we can't get one. And it was just a nasty remark, But those are the kind of things I say I hate to bring up, It's just things that happened in those days because it was 100% segregation, a lot of predators and whatnot, But anyhow, I got down there with it, and that was the beginning of the flight program there at Tuskegee. Well, here we are, standing on